Hey folks, welcome back to the show. Today's episode is an interview with someone who is a dear friend and who I'm so excited to be hosting on this podcast. He is none other than Ben Azadi, the guy behind the Metabolic Freedom podcast and a book by the same name, and a new book coming down next year, which we might just mention in the episode. But before we do that, of course, I always have to start by thanking you for being here, for following the podcast, for your comments, for all of the amazing reviews. I'm so touched by every single one of them. Know that I read them all, and I really take them to heart. So thank you so much. And I would love to invite you to something very special. So I'd love to invite you to sign up for my newsletter, which you will find at natniddam.com. At the top of the page, there's a red bar. It says sign up for newsletter. But why I'm putting a bit more emphasis on this today is because as of today, you will receive a series of emails after that you sign up for that newsletter that will basically take you on a little bit of a journey, that sharing some of my thoughts about how you need to prepare yourself if you're going to use things like, for example, bioregulators or anything else for longevity and health span. And so it's a bit of like a mini crash course on all of the foundations and basics that you really need to pay attention to before you get started on the big stuff. And even if you're already into the big stuff, you might find this interesting. There might be a couple of tidbits in there that are different than what you've been told or what you believe. So I don't want to talk about it too much, but if you haven't already done it, make sure to sign up for the newsletter. You'll get this beautiful kind of stream of information that I would love to get some feedback on. So be sure to let me know what you think. You can find me on Instagram at Natalie Niddam. That's probably the best way to go. All right, here we go. Is your diet keeping you metabolically handcuffed? This is a really big question, folks. If you've been strict with one type of diet, but you're frustrated by the lack of health benefits, you're going to want to listen to this episode as I chat with my good friend and health expert, Ben Azadi. We discuss Ben's Carnivore Experiment, the benefits of a flexible metabolism, and how to guide yourself towards becoming this gold standard called metabolically flexible or metabolically diverse. That's another great term. We also dive into the misconceptions around glucose, the importance of cycling between ketosis and higher carb days, all with that goal of optimizing metabolic health. We also talk about the potential impact of your genetics on your dietary choices. And finally, we, of course, talk about some of the less tangible things that we often forget. And I'm going to leave that for the podcast. If you've ever heard Ben speak at any conference, you probably know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, you're going to have to check it out in the podcast. Ben, like I said, has become a dear friend. He has over 15 years of experience in the health industry, and he is the author of 4 best-selling books, including his latest, Keto Flex. He's known as the health detective. He's the founder of Kamp, a global brand bringing awareness to ancient healing strategies such as the keto diet and fasting. But he's not a one-trick monkey. Ben is also the host of a top 15 podcast, the Metabolic Freedom Podcast, which won Keto Podcast of the Year in 2022 by the Metabolic Health Summit. You can find out more about Ben Azadi through his website, which is benazadi.com. You can check out his podcast, the Metabolic Freedom Podcast. And of course, he's also got a fantastic YouTube channel. And now let's jump into the episode. Hey folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Ben Azadi, welcome to the show. I am truly so excited to have you here today.
Nat, I love collaborating with you. We're going to have an amazing time. Let's do this.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. So guys, we know each other. We actually, the first time we really hung out was last December in Sarasota at the Elements of Vitality event. And that was when we had dinner with a bunch of other people, and Ben ordered 3 burgers, 2 of which had fried eggs on them with a side of salmon. And I saw there was some other protein thing that you found. Yeah, and this is a restaurant that actually prides itself on its kind of vegetarian options. And this man is like, actually, I'll have the burger. And then you can see the waitress and her eyes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And at the time you were doing a 90-day experiment of carnivore, which I would definitely want to talk to you about today at some point, because I know you then you did a couple of interviews and stuff around what the results of that were. And it must have been good, because you said you're going to be doing this periodically as an intervention. So I'm really curious about that. But the big story around Ben Azadi is the keto guy, Keto Kamp, still Keto Kamp, has transitioned. And in a way, I see this like, it's so amazing, because I see it as like as an emergence and a growing up and an expansion of yours. Really, it's not a change of direction. It's just an expansion into this space of metabolic freedom, which is so exciting. So I can't wait to dive into all of it with you.
Yeah, you said it really well. It's not really a change of direction, but an expansion. That's a beautiful way to put it. And I'm really excited about it too. So
tell us everything. Where should we start? Should we start with the expansion, or should we start with the Carnivore Experiment? Where do we
start with the expansion, and then it'll lead me to the Carnivore Experiment that I did. I've been following and teaching keto since 2014. I fell in love with it back then, along with intermittent fasting and different fasting strategies. And like a lot of people who fall in love with these different tools, I became dogmatic in the beginning. I thought like keto was the way. Everybody needs to do keto. Men and women do keto the same way, right? And I quickly learned like
children and babies.
Yeah, exactly.
But never mind.
I quickly discovered that it's very different for everybody, and there's an art to keto along with the science. And we know the science is clear; it does so many amazing things in the body. But then there's the art, which is arguably just as important as the science. So I began to customize it over the years, and I started to realize that women do it differently than men, and then women who are in a different stage of their life do it differently than other women that are in different stages of their lives. And I started to teach it and treat it like a tool, a tool to achieve metabolic flexibility, metabolic health. And I've always been that way, at least like after the first year of being dogmatic on keto. I was never that dogmatic person that says keto forever. I've always been about going in and out, using it as a tool. However, when I rebranded to Keto Kamp in 2018, a lot of people hear about me or see my videos, whatever it is, and they think like it's all about keto forever. And I see why, because I talk a lot about keto. My company's Keto Kamp, right? So the podcast was Keto Kamp Podcast, and it was the launch in 2019, where 700 plus episodes. And a few months ago, I got a book deal with Hay House, and it's a dream come true, one of my favorite publishers. And the name of the book is called Metabolic Freedom, which essentially means metabolic flexibility, but a different spin on it. We know, Nat, that the human body, the innate intelligence, is designed to achieve this metabolic freedom, where we could use whatever substrate is available, whether it's protein, carbs, fat, the fat in our body, or even like oxygen and sunshine to produce energy and burn fat. And we do really good at using any available substrate to achieve that when you're metabolically healthy. So the book's going to be all about that. And as I got the book deal, started writing the book, I'm looking at the podcast. I'm looking at the 700 plus episodes that I've done. You're one of those episodes. Fantastic conversation we did on peptides. I realize, we're so much more than keto, and I don't want to turn people off who want to learn more about metabolic health, who think that we're only going to talk about keto. So when I looked at the last 100, 200 episodes, maybe 35, 40% had episodes that were like focused on keto, but the majority were outside of that. So that's where I created the shift. And I said, all right, the book's going to be called Metabolic Freedom. I'm going to name the podcast the Metabolic Freedom Podcast. And that's where the switch was made. So it's officially called the Metabolic Freedom Podcast.
Well, congratulations. That's
thank you.
A beautiful shift. It's
Thank you, Nat.
Nothing against keto, but to your point, it's so much more, it's so much more demonstrative of what you stand for, right? Which is really respecting how you need to personalize whatever intervention it is for the individual, given what place and time they're in right now. Like that's, I think for those of us who've been in the space for more than 10 minutes, for the most part, we realize there's no one size fits all. And it sounds so cliche.
I wish it was that simple, right? Just,
Yeah. I mean, if only there was a one size fits all. And there are still people in our space who are adamant that there is a one size fits all. And I would say that there's two communities in particular in that camp, or in those camps, and I wouldn't put them in the same camp because they would kill each other. And they're the two extremes. We have the vegan community and the carnivore community that are extremely, I mean, I'm surprised at how aggressive the vegans are. I'm not that surprised at
the meat eaters. Yeah, it makes sense for them.
The meat eaters have the whatever. But I'm a little shocked at how aggressive the vegans can be. And I guess the meat eaters say that it's for deficiencies of, with this, that, and the other thing. But regardless, like, there's a massive polarization that's happened here. And that was why in a way, I was really curious and intrigued by when you declared at that event, you're like, oh yeah, I'm carnivore. And I was like, wait, what? Come on. You did not. And but as we talked, you talked about how, this is an intervention. It's an experiment. You ran your labs ahead, then you were going to run your labs after. And you did. And so, are you willing to share here? Because I know you did a couple of episodes really diving into the results, and maybe just give us a little overview and we can direct people back to those episodes if they want the whole story. But what made you decide to do a carnivore intervention?
Yeah, carnivore has always been fascinating to me. I did my first carnivore experiment in 2019, actually, where I did it for 40 days. Did some lab work, but it wasn't to the extent of this previous experiment that I did. But ever since 2019, I've been using carnivore as like a 30-day, 40-day reset a couple times per year. And I have always noticed amazing benefits when I've done it. So this time around, the last experiment, I'm like, okay, let me do another 30 days. That was the original plan. But let me do more labs. Let me get more data. And of course, this is my own experiment, so it's going to be different for everybody, but I could at least share like my personal results. So on day one, I did a comprehensive lab test with LabCorp, which if you did the retail on it, it's about a $3,500 panel. Mm-hmm. So of course, CBC and all the regular stuff, but A1C, fasting insulin, full thyroid panel with the antibodies and reverse T3, et cetera. And is my camera blurry here? Hold on. There we go. And then I did, of course, hormones, testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin. I did inflammatory markers, C-reactive protein, homocysteine. I also got my lipids done, which is probably the most fascinating part because I did an extensive lipid panel. I did the NMR profile, which is looking at the particle sizes. So I did that on day one, along with the stool test, the gut test, where I, of course, shipped my poop in a box to get analyzed. And then I threw on a continuous glucose monitor, and I already had my Oura Ring. So I had the previous metrics that I can compare to, sorry, my cameras. I had the previous metrics that I could compare with the new metrics. So I went full on in with carnivore, right? Day one, eating nothing but protein and fat, animal products. What was interesting, Nat, is that the gut test, it took about 3 weeks to get the results. So I got the results 3 weeks in. And essentially, it's looking at diversity, the different relationships to the bacteria, and how, bacteroides to Firmicutes and different balances and ratios. But ultimately, I wanted to see my gut diversity because that's really important. The more diverse your gut microbiome, right, the healthier you're going to be. So my scores were okay. My diversity showed average, not poor, not great, right in the middle. But what was interesting is that the lab report said, in order to increase my diversity, stay away from a ketogenic diet, stay away from eating too much red meat, eat all these polyphenols, fiber, plant food compounds, and then, retest, and then it should increase your diversity. What did I do? The complete opposite. Yeah, exactly. I was already 3 weeks in to my carnivore experiment, and I was not going to stop.
No.
So what ended up happening is I had planned to do 30 days, but I was feeling really good. And I thought there were some people commenting on some of my social media posts saying, 30 days is not enough. You should go 60 or 90 to get some more data. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. That makes sense. Let's do 60 days. So I ended up going 60, and I'm like, all right, let me push it out to 90 days. So I ended up doing 90 full days. But before I broke it, I did the whole lab panel again. Wow. I did the same stool test again. And let's talk about the stool test results. I got the results back, right? And the chief scientific officer for the company 10 Health that I did the stool test with said he wanted to hop on a Zoom to go over the results because it was surprising to him. And I developed 6 keystone bacteria that was not present on day one that were present on day 90.
Get out. And this is without the fiber, the polyphenols,
I didn't have a single fiber, polyphenol, or carbohydrate.
Well, not 90 days, but I saw this man eat. And
yeah, you did. Exactly. Yeah. And I stuck with it. And it was during the holidays too, during Christmas and Thanksgiving.
Did that. But it is our mutual friend, Karen, who saved you from the big faux pas. He was going to order the mushroom burger.
Yes.
It was a burger with mushrooms, and he was about to say, I'll have the mushroom without the mushroom. I'll have the mushroom burger without the mushrooms on top. And the waitress is kind of looking at him, and Karen's like, Ben, the burger's made of mushrooms. No, okay, not that one.
Yeah, Karen Martell saved me. I was going to almost eat a plant-based burger, not really. I thought it was a burger with a mushroom, but it was a mushroom burger. Yeah.
And so you developed all these keystone species. That is insane.
6 of them. And then 7 core bacteria that were not there on day 1 that were there on day 90. And all of my diversity scores improved, right? And it just goes to show you that.
How do you explain that? That's just...
I think the dietary shift, the stress of doing carnivore created that adaptation, which increased the diversity. Now, it's my hypothesis, but I do believe stressing the gut short term creates that adaptation. Like we know fasting does something similar where it stresses the gut, creates diversity. And I think the same thing happened with stressing the gut with carnivore. Now, I think if I would have stuck with it long term, then I would have seen it go the opposite direction. But for me, 90 days was a good sweet spot. Everything improved. Even the chief scientific officer said like it changed the way he thinks about gut health. And he's been studying this for 20 plus years, right? So that was interesting, showing, fiber. And I'm not against fiber. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against eating vegetables and polyphenols and all that. But is it overhyped, right? And I think it may be. And I don't think we need that sometimes to develop diversity. There's other ways to do it. 90 days might be a little bit long for women. For me, 90 days was good. Here's what else I noticed. My Oura Ring, I got more deep sleep and REM sleep. I woke up less times throughout the night. My HRV on average improved as well. With the lipids, here's something interesting. I was already eating a high-fat, high animal-based diet day 1, although I was still consuming carbs. I was having these Keto Flex refeed days. I was still eating some plants here and there. My total cholesterol on day 1 was around 250, 280, somewhere between there. I forget the exact number. On day 90, I went to 450. My total LDL was 150 on day 1. On day 90, I went to 350.
So would this not give most people a bit of a heart attack?
Right. You would think that.
Like not literally a heart attack, but would this not stress people out typically?
Yeah, it would. But here's the thing. Here's why it's important to get all the labs done. I got the particle sizes done of those LDL. And the majority, about 85% of my entire LDL particles, the majority of my LDL particles were the pattern A, which is the large and fluffy, which is actually... building the immune system, helping with different hormones, very healthy. And a really small percentage was the small and sticky. Combine that with looking at my HDL and triglycerides, they were both optimal. They had that perfect 1-to-1 ratio, optimal. My fasting insulin was 3.8 on day 1, 3.6 on day 90, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
My C-reactive protein was under 0.5 on both readings. My homocysteine was in the single digits. So based off of all of that, and I even interviewed Dr. Philip Ovadia, who's a heart surgeon, and I had him review all the results, and he said, you were healthy on day 1, and you got even healthier and reduced your risk of heart disease even further by day 90, coming from a heart surgeon, right?
Wow.
So it's just, if you don't look at the full picture and you just look at total cholesterol, total LDL, to your point, you're going to think, oh my gosh, I got to get on statin. This is killing me, right? But it actually did the exact opposite when you put it all together.
It is shocking to me that particle size test is not standard.
I know.
It's so, like, it kind of blows my mind. It's like, we know it's there, and it's not even not accepted by the mainstream medicine. Like, they know particle size is relevant. Insurance companies would benefit from people having this information.
Correct.
And it's this kind of headstrong kind of, nope, we're not looking at that. Just like I just
there's 15.4 billion reasons why they don't look at it, and that's how much the statin industry made last year, right? There's a lot of money from statins.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Okay, so let's not go down that rabbit hole.
That'll open up a big rabbit hole.
It's a waste of time right now. Bottom line, let's not gnash over the problem. Let's talk about the solution to the problem. So bottom line is 90 days on carnivore made you healthier. Now tell me why you do this as an intervention. And so will you continue to do 90 days as an intervention? So basically it's like 3 months on, 3 months off, 3 months on, 3 months off. Or would you reduce the time on carnivore next time? Would you do a 30-day intervention? Like what's the reasoning? Because you're a metabolically flexible guy, right? Like, and let's talk a little bit about metabolic flexibility. So in the world of Ben can be fully ketogenic, running on fat and ketones, basically. And then on your Keto Flex days where you're bringing carbs into the picture, your body switches over. There's no drama. There's no muss, no fuss. It's like, oh, cool. We'll just run this stuff instead, right? Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's the goal. That is the goal. And just to answer your question with the carnivore thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll do another 90 days, maybe, but I'm actually doing another 30 days right now. I'm on day 9 of carnivore. So for May, I'm doing carnivore just for this month with my students as like a challenge for those who I just wanted to, participate with. There's a whole bunch of my students who are doing it. And I said, I'll do it with you, right? I think it's cool to do it with them. But 30 days, 40 days, 2 or 3 times per year is probably what I'm going to most likely do. To your next question about burning fat, burning sugar, we know that our cells have those two primary fuel sources, sugar and glucose, which we'll put in the same category, and then fat and ketones we'll put in a different category. When we're born into this world, babies that are breastfed are actually naturally going in and out of a state of ketosis. They're naturally keto flexing because breast milk has saturated fat and cholesterol. And yes, there is sugar and glucose, but the baby is so efficient at using it, it naturally goes in and out of ketosis, and that helps that neurological development of the baby's brain. And what typically happens is, the baby gets weaned off and it gets on a high sugar formula, and then it grows up and it starts eating carbohydrates and processed carbs. This is what happened to me, and snacking and eating 17, 20 times a day. And we take a natural fat burning human being and we teach it to burn sugar. And there's nothing wrong with burning sugar unless you're stuck burning sugar. When you're burning sugar and stuck as a sugar burner, you're pretty much the opposite of metabolic freedom. It's metabolically being handcuffed, meaning you have to rely on that next piece of granola bar or protein shake or food or snack to give you some short-term energy. So every 2 to 3 hours, you're looking for your next meal to give you that glucose hit, and then it crashes, and then you need more glucose, and it's just not sustainable, and it's aging you faster. It's creating a lot of inflammation.
Yeah.
And 93% of Americans are stuck as sugar burners. That is a high percentage, meaning only 7% of people are actually metabolically healthy. But then in the keto space and in the carnivore space, because carnivore is keto, we see another form of metabolic inflexibility where they're stuck burning fat and only fat, and they forgot how to burn sugar. And that's also a problem. Now, that's a rare problem in this space particularly, but it is another problem. So a Keto Flex day, I read about it in my book, Keto Flex. When you're metabolically healthy and metabolically free, yes, you burn fat when you need to. You could go into a fast or just eat high fat and protein, lower carbs. You're producing ketones, you're burning fat. And then you could have a day like me where I'll have 300 grams, 400 grams of carbs in a single day, intentionally get myself out of ketosis, burn sugar. And then within 24 hours of going back into a low carb approach or fasting, I'm right back to burning ketones and without a hiccup. Like I feel great.
No, that is amazing. Because you're talking to someone whose body fights ketosis tooth and nail. Tooth and nail. I can do a 5-day fast. You know how people talk about, oh yeah, day 3, I stopped being hungry. I feel amazing. My energy's the best. I fight like a pig dog until the last minute of the last hour of the 5th day.
Oh no. Your ketones, you're testing ketones as well. They're not showing up.
They're there. They just don't suppress my appetite.
Got it.
My body's like, yeah, ketones, schmetones, whatever. We'll run on them, but you're still hungry.
Yeah. I guess I'm one of the blessed ones there. I could.
Exactly.
But that is the goal, though, right? To use whatever substrate is available. And when I travel, right? I don't know what you do when you travel, Nat, and you travel a lot. I'm rarely eating on an airplane or at the airport because it's toxic food, and I'm just letting my body feed off its body fat, and I'm fasted, and my body's producing ketones, and there's no symptoms from that. I feel actually better. I feel great.
I feel clear for sure.
Right. But here's the thing, like if I do too much keto and too much fasting, then that becomes a problem. So we do want to balance it out with feasting and what I call Keto Flex days. It's really important to go through those cycles of, yes, feasting, famine, and that's really just the part of life for us.
Yeah, well, and I think it resonates for, if you think about how the body works, and if you think about our ancestral, way of being, sometimes there was a lot of food, and a lot of times there was not a lot of food, and sometimes there was zero food. And if we had gotten hangry and into some kind of weird, like you see people who are metabolically, and I don't think I'm that metabolically inflexible because I can go quite a while without eating and be fine and function really well. But you see those people where if they have to skip a meal, it's a massive problem for them.
Yeah.
And that is not your natural state. That is not your natural state of being. And it's a real, as you said, you're handcuffed.
Yeah.
And more than handcuffed, it's a sign of metabolic dysfunction.
That's right. Yeah. Think about, like you just said it, our ancestors. Imagine if they went through that as well. The feeling hangry, the brain fog, the dip in energy, like we would have probably become extinct because they wouldn't have been able to hunt and kill, right?
They had to be able to go out and hunt and kill.
Yes. Yeah. And ketosis is that metabolic process that helped them achieve that. So we know ketones are great for the brain, especially beta hydroxybutyrate, which crosses the blood-brain barrier, gives your brain another source of fuel. There's a lot of misconceptions in the fitness and health space when it comes to glucose, right? We hear people say that glucose is the most important fuel for the body. The body always needs glucose. And there's some half truths there because yes, the brain and the body always need glucose. Always. Yep. It cannot survive without it. However, we don't have to necessarily eat the glucose to achieve that. The body is really sophisticated, and we have this incredible metabolism that could create glucose via gluconeogenesis, either from protein, amino acids, or even from the backbone of fat. The body knows what to do. So even in like a full state of ketosis, I'm talking about 6 millimolars per liter of beta hydroxybutyrate, which is deep ketosis. The brain is using, I think the highest percentage the brain could use is about 70% fat ketones, and then still 30% glucose. It's always going to use glucose, right? So there are some misconceptions there. There's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. There really isn't in the medical textbooks. There's essential amino acids, essential fats, but no such thing as essential carbs. Now, don't get me wrong. I see a role for carbohydrates. I have carbohydrates. I recommend them, but they're not essential for us.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Let's maybe talk a little bit about how you coach or how you help guide people in, you have someone who's metabolically stuck, let's say, and we want to move them into this space where they're metabolically flexible. Do you want to talk a little bit about how people can kind of move themselves in that direction? Because I mean, certainly in my experience as a nutritionist, cold turkey often doesn't work for people. It can, but it hurts.
Yeah.
It's painful. You have to have a client who's extremely committed, who's really tough, who's going to deal with the fallout of their body not getting the fuel it's accustomed to, thinking it's going to die because it kind of forgot about this whole fat business. You want to talk a little bit about how you help people to move into this space?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I'm not a big fan of the cold turkey approach as well. It's like somebody who's a couch potato and they run a marathon or do a CrossFit workout. It's like, you might finish the workout, but that's going to feel awful. You're going to be sore for days. You might even really hurt yourself.
Yeah.
So the first step is to identify how many carbohydrates are you currently eating. And the average American consumes about 300 to 400 grams of carbs per day. And you could simply use a free app out there to just log in your regular meals before you make any changes and just see how many carbs are you having. Once you identify that, then on day one, you want to gradually decrease those total carbs by 20% or so, 15, 20%. And do that every single day until eventually your total carbohydrates are under 50 grams total per day. That's the upper limit. Usually people get there within about 7 to 10 days, but I wouldn't recommend getting there in a couple days. To your point, that's a cold turkey approach. You'll have symptoms, but over 7 to 10 days, you will not. At the same time, as you're lowering those carbs gradually, you want to increase your healthy fats and protein. Healthy fats, what I mean by that are saturated fats and monounsaturated fats. And proteins, ideally, are animal-based proteins, but if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, you could also get it from plant-based proteins, just not the same. And you also want to keep your electrolytes up, because here's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. As you lower your carbs, you're naturally going to lower insulin. That's very important, because when we talked about 93% of Americans who are metabolically unhealthy, they have high levels of insulin, every single one of them. And high levels of insulin is the first domino to fall that leads to chronic disease. Okay. Your insulin could be elevated for about 14 years. This is a Whitehall study, 14 years before the fasting glucose or A1C changes. And then it changes so dramatically, type 2 diabetes or prediabetes diagnosis. Meanwhile, for 14 years, insulin is being pumped out. Mm-hmm. So getting a fasting insulin is very important. It's one of the most important blood markers to get. It's cheap. It's available to get. Even if your doctor does not want you to order does not want to order it for you, you could still get it online. So with insulin, lowering insulin, which is the key, you're going to shed a lot of excess water weight. That's great, because you're going to look lighter and feel lighter, less puffy. However, the kidneys go through this diuresis process where it also sheds a lot of electrolytes and minerals at the same time. So if that happens too quickly, and if you're not replenishing your electrolytes, you get something called the keto flu. Right. The keto flu is where you feel awful. You feel like you're sick, you're fatigued, and you're thinking, man, this keto sucks, right? But if you just simply have a gradual decrease in carbs and get your electrolytes in and minerals in every single day starting day one, there's no need to go through that keto flu. I've taken, I was looking at some of the stats. I've taken close to 5,000 people since 2014 through different keto protocols. And not one person has reported to me they got the keto flu, unless they said, screw Ben, I'm just going to go cold turkey. Then they did get the keto flu. Right. So suffering is not required, right? So you also want to keep the fats up, because as you increase your fats and decrease carbs, it just gets your body familiar with using fatty acids for fuel. As you do that, within 7 to 10 days, you make that switch. The switch is going into a fat burning state, where you go from being a sugar burner to burning fat, to being a fat burner. And you would verify that by testing your blood ketones. And you could get a Keto Mojo. It's what I use. And once that Keto Mojo shows 0.5 or higher, it's giving you millimoles per liter, you are burning fat instead of sugar. And you celebrate it and like you did a good job. Now, most people will get there within 7 to 10 days. If somebody has, hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance, or type 2 diabetes, it might take them about 3 weeks to get there, and they might need to take their total carbs instead of 50 grams per day to under 20 grams to be a little bit more strict with that. But everybody will get there eventually.
And are you talking net carbs or total carbs?
Total carbs. In the beginning, I used to talk about net carbs, but there was too many loopholes there. So I think total carbs should be the focus. Yeah.
So for people listening, if you don't know what we're talking about, net carbs is when you take the total number of carbs minus the fiber in your food. And so let's say you have 100 grams of total carbs, but there was 50 grams of fiber in that food, then technically there's only 50 grams of net carbs. And so people were walking around thinking, I'm still going to get into ketosis and look at me, I'm getting 100 grams of carbs, and the body's going, yeah, no, actually that's not going to work.
That's exactly it. Yeah. I saw that way too often. That's what changed my mind about, okay, maybe we shouldn't do this net carb thing. I learned the hard way.
Well, and it's because it's so tempting, right? So let's talk a little bit. So net, at the end of the day, you're still within the context of metabolic freedom, you're still encouraging people to spend some of their time in a ketogenic state, at least, right? Because if you don't use it, you kind of lose it. It's not enough to be low glycemic.
Correct. Yeah. Ketosis has wonderful benefits that I could get into if you want, but
by all means.
Yeah, it goes far beyond just a low carbohydrate sort of paleo diet. And a lot of people ask me that question: what's the difference between a paleo diet and a keto diet? A paleo diet is a low fat diet, and it's whole foods, and it's a great option, especially from a standard American diet, but it's not low enough in carbs to enter ketosis. Ketosis is very low carbohydrate. So I don't even look at keto as a diet. I look at it as a metabolic process. And with ketosis, there's a lot of benefits. Like you said, if you don't use it, you lose it. You also don't get all these benefits with ketosis as well. We know that ketones are signaling molecules, and they actually signal to your mitochondria that times are tough. There's a stress and there's a famine, or it's winter. There's not a lot of carbohydrates. And short term, this is a really incredible stress. We know about hormesis, right? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. A stress that you adapt to, you get stronger. So with that stress, the mitochondria actually go through this mitochondrial biogenesis where it creates more mitochondria because you're stressing it out in a positive way with ketosis. And obviously, if you create more mitochondria, you create more cellular energy. Amazing, more ATP, right? We all want that. When you create more ATP, it raises your basal metabolic rate, your metabolism. Meaning you burn more calories without having to track a single calorie. That is actually the number one way people lose weight on ketosis, is because of this raising of your basal metabolic rate through the increased cellular energy. You combine that with lowering of insulin and lowering of cell inflammation. It's a trifecta for rapid weight loss that's sustainable. So you achieve all that with ketosis. And we know that the mitochondria, and I think, Nat, you talked about like carnivores versus vegans. We see so many people out there arguing about everything in our nutrition space, and it does our community a big disservice when they just go back and forth. But I think most health experts would agree that the mitochondria are really important. I mean, you talk really magnificently about peptides and its relationship to the mitochondria, and supporting the mitochondria are the name of the game. And when you are supporting the mitochondria with ketosis, you're going to feel better. And when we look at the bodies, the cells inside of the body that have the highest concentration of mitochondria, it's the brain cells. So that is usually the first thing people notice when they do keto. Their brain clicks on. They're like, oh, wow, the brain fog is gone. I have mental clarity. I'm remembering people's names. I'm able to focus at work because of what it's doing at the mitochondrial level in the brain. And of course, it supports other areas that have mitochondria, but it's that brain performance, mental clarity that most people notice right away. So the goal is to achieve that, to feel that, to experiment with that. And then you reshape your metabolism. Now it knows how to burn fat. It knows how to use ketones. The mitochondria are now primed to use ketones. Then you go back to going in and out, right? And you could get really creative with this, and it's different for men and women. But the goal is to use both of these energy systems from time to time, so they, keep things moving along. And like you said it best, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. You're going to forget how to use that process.
Yeah. So when you're encouraging people to flip in and out, you're talking about day to day, or is it you spend 5 days in keto, 2 days? Like, you talk about feasting and famine. And interestingly enough, the first time I really heard it articulated like that was at Dan Pompa's, an event, Dan Pompa's, that I landed at almost by accident, like years ago. And at the time, Mindy was just coming up. And I remember him calling her up on stage and saying, this woman is doing crazy stuff on YouTube. And this is Mindy Pelz I'm talking about. It's got to be at least 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago. Anyway, it was a long time ago. But he talked then about feast and famine.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It resonated so deeply with me, because even now, even if I'm coaching someone and we're not even talking about ketosis, people kind of are getting into this chronic, they're overusing fasting, right? Like people are overdoing the fasting, and the body is slamming on the brakes going, actually, this isn't working for me anymore. Here's the thing. If there really is a famine out there, we got to hang on to everything we got. Yeah. We don't know. We just don't know, right? If there's ever going to be another meal again. And without that trigger of abundance, at least once a week, things just don't work out.
Yeah. No, well said. Exactly. Dr. Pompa taught that to me too, right? The feast famine cycling, he calls it also diet variation. Yeah. When you do too much fasting, I mean, the goal is to master these two pathways, mTOR and autophagy, right? Autophagy is something you get through exercise and fasting. It's more catabolic, where your body repairs cells and regenerates cells. And it's really wonderful unless you get too much. Then it could weaken the immune system and you become catabolic and gaunt. And then mTOR is more of the anabolic pathway, right? Mechanistic target of rapamycin, growth, anabolic. We know that's great in spurts, but too much mTOR all the time. Bodybuilders, for example, are an mTOR the majority of the time. They're aging rapidly, and the average bodybuilder lives about 12 years less than the average person because of this constant mTOR. So the magic is in getting some autophagy, mTOR back and forth, and they have an inverted relationship. So if you're activating mTOR, you're deactivating or lowering autophagy and vice versa. So with keto, you're getting more autophagy. You combine keto with fasting, you get even more autophagy. You stay there for a long time, too catabolic, not good for you. Thyroid metabolism slows down. But when you introduce what I call flex days or feast days, not a cheat day, but flex days or feast days.
Yeah, I love that actually. Yeah.
You now activate mTOR, remind the metabolism. There's no famine, like you said, Nat. Ramp things back up, and it just prevents any of the damage from happening from any of the two extremes.
Yeah, no, that's really, it's really key. So, what are your thoughts on? So I've done quite a lot of work in the whole running genetic panels for people, and you get people where there are certain genetic markers, and it's been a while since I've actually looked at one, but you look at genetic markers and there's an indication that says that maybe saturated fat could possibly drive inflammation in a certain segment of the population, or that high fat diets are not conducive for these people. What have you seen? Because, you've worked with so many people now. Have you seen this play? Because here's the thing, the interesting thing about genetics, like there's a lot of theory on paper, but we don't always see it playing out. And it's a little bit like how your gut diversity and your keystone bacteria, like it was, this is why the guy had to get on the phone with you is like, we need to talk about this because this is what I do. And I've not seen this before. So Are you seeing those genetic factors kind of playing out in the population, or are you seeing that maybe not so much? And my belief with genetics is we know what we know, but there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot of redundancies built into the human body we're not even aware of yet, or alternate pathways that may kick in that we don't know about. So what have you seen in that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well said. No, I'm with you on that. I think, getting some genetic testing done, if you want to spend your money on that, can give you some clues. But we know epigenetics rules at the end of the day. It's really the overall goal is to do things in your control, your environment for epigenetics. With, those who have those specific genes who say you can't process saturated fat as well as other people, I haven't seen that to be the case in terms of it raising inflammatory markers when they eat more saturated fat, unless they're combining saturated fats with high carbohydrates. That is
that's a recipe for
it's a recipe for disaster, but especially if you have those genes.
Okay.
And that's an important caveat to mention because I make this clear when I teach my students and in my book, Keto Flex, on a higher carb day, it's actually a low fat day. You do not, with the Randall cycle, what happens is you eat high carbs and high fat. Well, the Randall cycle will prioritize the glucose first. That's more toxic. And what ends up happening, the fat pulls into your bloodstream and it creates inflammation, right? So if you're having a high carb day or you're eating high carb right now, it should be low fat, under 40 total grams. And that's especially important for those who have those genetic SNPs with saturated fats. But, if that is something that is a concern for you, simply having more monounsaturated fats and more lean proteins, more white breast instead of the dark meat, those are simple things you can do that, but also look at it from the full perspective of all the labs I mentioned earlier, and then you can make a decision if you need to make some changes. Yeah,
no, for sure. That's a really good point. Tell me have you seen the continuous ketone monitors?
Man, no, I have not. I mean, I've heard about it. I haven't used it yet.
Shout to you.
I'm surprised they haven't. Seriously, I want to use it.
Send you a case yet? I mean, all the people on the planet, they need using their device because that, I've got not one but two Keto Mojos in my house, and I got turned off about poking holes in my fingers.
Yeah, I get it.
Those lancets are actually, that's not true. The ketone monitor little pokies are nowhere near, those lancets they send you when you're doing those at-home tests, they're actually saws. They're awful.
I know. They're not fun.
The ketone monitors are not nearly that bad, but but yeah, the continuous ketone monitors, I'm really curious about. So
me too. I'm really excited for that. And I know they're working on a dual monitor where it's glucose and ketones in one monitor. Right now you have to get a ketone and a glucose one. I got to reach out to these folks. I would be the perfect person with all my students to try it out and myself. This is really cool. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
In terms of like continuous monitors that will give you some data continuously, what do you think is next? Like uric acid, lactic acid? What do you think is next in the space here?
Have you heard about Core Health, that guy that allows you to measure your inflammation? Your red blood cell sedimentation rate at home.
Oh, interesting. No, I think I've heard somewhat about it, but tell me more.
It's not it's not continuous. You're testing your blood, but it's actually like a device that's very attractive. It looks, when you get it, it's kind of like an Apple type device. The aesthetic, let's just say. And it's an at-home blood test. It's not a lot of blood, and it tests the sedimentation rate of your red blood cells.
Cool.
And that is an indication of inflammation. Now it is, I've heard from a couple of people, it's a very specific type of inflammation. It's not like an HSCRP, like by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think that getting insight into your levels of inflammation is massive.
I agree.
As far as the lactate and all that other stuff is concerned, I don't really know. Like, I think as a starting point, if we can get a dual monitor that measures the glucose and the ketones, could we measure insulin while we're at it?
Oh yeah, that would be amazing.
That would be amazing. Would that be right?
Game changer.
Because, I've worn the Dexcom 7, and I would say having a dual monitor would be so nice at not having that alarm go off.
Yes.
And I finally got you finally get your blood sugar to go down. You're like around 60 or you're around 60 and you're in ketosis. And this thing's like sounding the alarm.
Yeah.
Bring the ambulance. She's going to die. And I'm like, no, I'm feeling really good.
I'm in ketosis. Please leave me alone.
Leave me alone. You have like the cortisol rush, the blood sugar is being produced because you think your body thinks you're being chased by a lion.
Right.
Terrible.
Yeah, the dual is going to be a game changer. I'm really excited to use that.
Yeah, no, I'm down for the dual. Yeah. Okay. So I just love your work. And I love this direction that you've moved in, the whole metabolic freedom direction, because what's interesting about the work that you do, and we get a lot of criticism, and certainly in our space, certainly in my space, the longevity space, that it's expensive, that you have to spend so much money. And I think what's phenomenal about the work that you do is actually it doesn't. It costs more money to eat organic, grass-fed and whatnot. But the truth of the matter is, I think that if people went from a SAD diet, even if it wasn't grass-fed meat, even if it wasn't all organic, if you just went to a whole food diet of whatever food you can afford and just got away from the processed stuff, people would automatically be healthier.
So true. And then when you start practicing fasting, you're going to save money, right? You save money, apply it to more healthier food. That's the first step. To detach from that standard American diet. It is so toxic. And even if it's not grass-fed, you're still going to be better than where you were with the standard American diet.
Yeah. And let's talk about one more thing, which I think is really big in the keto space, and this whole idea of dirty keto.
Yeah, dirty keto.
Dirty keto. Let's talk about dirty keto and what your thoughts are on dirty keto, because again, it's a little bit like the net carb, total carb problem.
Yeah, dirty keto, it is a thing, a very popular thing, and I've done several videos on it in the past. Essentially, it's this, right? Just because a food is keto friendly does not mean it's health friendly. And arguably, there are a set of fats that are really popular in the keto space that are more inflammatory than processed sugar. And Dr. Kay Shanahan even believes they're more dangerous than smoking cigarettes. And of course, those are the seed oils, the processed seed oils, the polyunsaturated fats that are all over keto products. That would be considered dirty keto if you want to call it that. They're just unhealthy for any human being, whether you're doing keto or not. And the reason these fats are so bad for us is that they're very unstable. They're processed at high heat temperatures, And when you take a unstable fat to begin with and apply high heat, what's going to happen? It's going to go rancid and it's going to oxidize. And when it goes rancid and oxidized, it stinks and it looks really bad. So what do? They add chemical agents and detergents and they make it look nice and liquidy, and they put it into a bottle, and then the American Heart Association puts their stamp of approval on it. So these are going to be canola oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, rice bran oil, and grapeseed oil. These are really inflammatory. They're all over the keto space, and they will be problematic. And then another issue with the dirty foods, unless there was something you wanted to ask on that.
No,
Okay.
well, I think there's a fairly prominent person in the health space that's really pushing back hard on the seed oil narrative. I don't know if you've seen her stuff.
No.
Lately.
What's her name?
She usused to be known as the Paleo Mom, Dr. Sarah Ballantyne.
I know who that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's done a 180, and it's an interesting. I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion moving forward.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Seed oils are really healthy for you when you do it when you consume them the right way. And when we I looked at a lot of these studies. I even just had this conversation last week with Dr. Kate Shanahan.
Nice.
She has a new book coming out called Dark Calories, and we did a full 2-hour interview all about the book.
Wow.
And I even brought this up. I'm like, when we look at people out there showing the benefits of seed oils, and then the people out there showing how harmful they are, from what I have seen is that they're not distinguishing between the adulterated seed oils and the unadulterated seed oils, meaning the processed ones and the unprocessed ones. Mm-hmm. If it's an unprocessed seed oil, it is really healthy for you. I mean, phosphatidylcholine, for example, PC oil, right? We love that product. It's a seed oil.
My shake every day.
Yeah, I have it every single morning. That's an omega-6 fat, but it's not processed. It's cold pressed. It's stable. So with Sarah Ballantyne, that's her name, right? Sarah Ballantyne? Yeah. I love her work, and I would love to have more of a conversation about this, because I've looked at the studies, and all the studies I've looked at that show they're inflammatory are the processed seed oils, and the ones I've seen that are beneficial are unprocessed, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Again, like in this polarized environment that we're in, it's like we're taking this concept of nuance and we're punting it to the curb, right?
So true.
And I think with the dirty keto, at the end of the day, it's a little, it's a little bit like vegans eating tofurkey. Like, if you want to eat turkey, for the love of God, eat a turkey.
Yes.
And if you don't want to eat turkey because you feel bad for the turkey, then eat plants. Yeah. But don't try to turn your plants into turkey, because it doesn't work. There's only one entity in the universe that can do that. It's called Mother Nature. And she can take whatever the turkey eats and turn it into a turkey. As for the rest of us, we just can't do it. Right. And just I think the addiction that we have developed for hyperpalatable foods, and I think that's where the dirty keto comes in. It gives us those hyperpalatable foods but masked as something that's supposedly going to fit with our keto diet. Yeah. But people fall into the same trap all over again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Overconsume the wrong foods. And, even on a keto diet, if you overconsume, you actually won't be much healthier.
Yeah, especially if you overconsume the rancid fats as well. And a lot of people on keto, they're consuming a lot of artificial sweeteners as well, sucralose and aspartame, and we know that's not healthy as well. But there's some simple swaps, right? It's instead of the bad fats I mentioned, we want more saturated fats or monounsaturated fats, or even if it's a seed oil, an unprocessed seed oil. Like I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, the majority of seed oils out there, 85, 90% are the processed variety, but there's a percentage that's not, and I would consume that.
Yeah.
By the way, there's a study in Dr. Kate Shanahan's book, Dark Calories. This is fascinating. It just reminded me of it. A 5-ounce serving of French fries cooked in canola oil created the same amount of carcinogens that's equivalent to 25 cigarettes.
Holy cow.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow. I'm really happy at this very second. I don't remember the last time I had French fries.
Yeah, me too, right? So French fries, if you're going to fry it, a beef tallow, coconut oil is much better. Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah, coconut oil is a funny one. I find that very often when coconut oil is added to packaged foods, it develops to me, it tastes rancid.
Oh, interesting.
I've had I recently had, and I won't name names because maybe it was just a bad bag, but I had a coffee sent to me recently, and they put, there's coconut. I mean, I made it and there was like this weird taste, and I went and looked at the ingredients, and there was the coconut oil. And I feel like there's a point of coconut oil, even coconut oil, when it's processed in a certain way, it kind of goes off.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
And so it's really back to the processing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like even the best stuff, if it's over processed, overheated, at some point it can turn bad on you. So anyway, this Dark Calories book, I'm going to have to get my hands on it. I maybe have a conversation with Dr.
Yeah, I'm happy to connect you with her too. She's making the rounds right now. The book's out in June. They had sent me an advanced copy. They'll probably do the same for you. So do you want me to connect you with her?
Yeah, no, I would love that. Yeah. So, okay, so I know you're going to have to run soon because you have dinner with Mom.
Every Thursday, and my fiance, yes.
Love it. If my mother's listening to this, she's going to be so jealous. She lives in Florida. I live in Toronto. There's no dinner with Mom on Thursday.
No.
It's the worst part of living away from family, really. Anyway, how do we want to close this off? Like there's so much gold here, and I think that the work that you do is just so critically important to get out to as many people as possible, because I keep talking to people about the foundations to the point where I'm pretty sure some people want to come out and just smack me and just move on from the foundations. But this is foundational in terms of setting up our landscape or our terrain to then be able to do the fancy stuff for a longer, healthier life.
Yeah.
What else? Is there anything else you wanted to talk about, or anything?
Yeah, I'll say this. I'll say we spoke about a lot today, and I'll say, like, if there's going to be one action your listeners or viewers take, let it be the action of getting a fasting insulin done. Right? Let that be the biggest action you take, because as I mentioned earlier, when you have high levels of insulin, that is the first domino to fall that leads to metabolic disaster. It leads to hyperinsulinemia, which I mentioned that Whitehall study 14 years before the diagnosis of diabetes is made. And people are not dying from diabetes. It's pretty rare. They're dying from what the diabetes leads to. It's the cancer, the heart disease, the kidney failures, the amputations, and that's a whole host of really serious issues. But it started with the high insulin. So if your insulin levels are not in the single digits, that's great news. You have work to do. You understand, here's my goal. I want to get it in the single digits. If it's 25, 35, 45, whatever, I've seen even higher, you have work to do and do all the things possible to just get it lowered. And as you lower it, everything else, all the other markers will optimize as well. You'll lose weight. You'll have more energy. You'll have better sleep. So use that insulin as the target for everything that you're doing. And as you get your insulin lowered, everything, all of the pieces will start to click, and then you'll start to work on other things. But I would recommend you start with that fasting insulin.
Nice. And get the book Keto Flex, because I think you do a really good job in that book of walking people through this whole process.
Thank you, Nat.
And then, maybe sign up for one of Ben's programs, and you too can do carnivore with him for 30 days.
Yeah. Hey, we could do it together. Keto Flex, I didn't tell you this, but I just released the second edition of Keto Flex, and it is
second edition.
Yeah, second edition. I'll get you a copy. It's expanded and revised. There's actually an entire section on protocols, like troubleshooting keto. Because again, I've taken about 5,000 people, and I see some people have these symptoms. So I have a protocol for all these specific symptoms. Yeah. And then I changed the whole framework to make it easier to follow. So that's available now. It's at ketoflexbook.com, but I'll get you a copy of it, Nat.
Amazing. Oh, I'm excited. And then I think we can't complete our episode without talking about at least one, if not two, very important vitamins.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Vitamin G and vitamin J, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Vitamin G and vitamin J. And you came up with this. So
you came up with the J. I came up with the G.
You came up with the G, but only when I heard you talking about the G.
Yeah. So these vitamins are crucial for everything. You talk about the fundamentals, like this is part of the fundamental for sure. They lower inflammation, they lower blood pressure, they lower A1C blood sugar levels. People who take vitamin G and vitamin J are just happier and healthier, more vibrant, restructures your brain to see things that you value more. I'm trying not to give it away. Yeah. Dr. Joe Dispenza has seen amazing things with people going through his workshop where the brain and the body produces dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, GABA when they take vitamin G and vitamin J. And you can't get it on Amazon. We don't have an affiliate link because it's vitamin gratitude and vitamin joy. It is the practice of gratitude, the feeling of gratitude and joy, not just the checklist of it, but the feeling of it. And those are real studies I was referencing on vitamin G, vitamin J. It's a universal law, right, Nat? Whatever you feed energy into expands. In other words, what you appreciates. And what you think about you bring about. So don't go a day without getting your vitamin G and vitamin J. I've got a lot of vitamin G and vitamin J for you, Nat.
And right back at you, Ben. Honestly, it's always such a joy speaking with you. It's such an honor to have you on the show. And thank you for taking the time. And I can't wait till we have another conversation.
I can't wait. It's been a long time coming. Thank you for trusting me with your community. I know you don't take that lightly. So it was an absolute honor. Thank you, Nat.
Thank you. And before we go, tell people where just in case, tell them where they can find you. So
my website is benazadi.com. You can find everything on there. If you want to get the book Keto Flex, it's ketoflexbook.com. And in June of 2025, Metabolic Freedom will be available at all bookstores and Audible, hopefully at the airports as well. So stay tuned for the Metabolic Freedom coming out next year.
Amazing. And don't forget about the Metabolic Freedom podcast.
Oh, yes. How could I forget about that? We have over 700 episodes. Start with the episode I did with Nat. She came right here to Miami in my studio. We had an amazing conversation. I learned so much about peptides. So yeah, Metabolic Freedom Podcast, which we also post on my YouTube channel.
Oh my God, 700 episodes. You are a beast.
You too. You are too.
Thank you so much. Have a great night. Thanks,
Matt.